In today's gospel, we have the road to Emmaus. And the one thing about the road to Emmaus, you got to kind of have to take a look at it piece by piece and then kind of see the totality from there. One of the things is that the disciples are going the wrong way. They're going to the west. There's a church that was built during the time of the Crusades, Benedictine church in Abu Ghosh. Abu Ghosh is about 7.5 miles from the Temple Mount. They've been doing excavations right near the Abu Ghosh, and they think that they found Emmaus. But the point is that it's they were going in the wrong direction. And then as they were going, they were discussing along the way. One of the things about discussion is that certainly the Lord Jesus could have put discussion to an end. He could have come back and, come on the Temple Mount and said, ha ha, look at me, I was resurrected, come in massive glory and put the fear of the Lord in them. But he didn't. And so what he wanted to do was to have what the disciples were doing, discussion. Well, how did this happen? How could, we crucified this Jesus. We crucified him. He died. We saw him die. But the tomb is empty. And how is it that the tomb is empty? Did the disciples have a ton of cash that they weren't telling anybody about to pay off the guards and the pilot? And what happened? Why was this occur? So he wanted them to think about that. And then only after that, in 50 days in Pentecost, when Peter has the answer of why it occurred and they understood it, then they were able to respond with faith. If Jesus had come back to the Temple Mount with glory and honor and power, they would not have understood it with faith. They would have seen it by sight. But certainly, a month later, a year later, 2 years later, they would have said, well, did I really see that? Did we really see that? Was there a natural explanation for it? So again, the idea that there needs to be that discussion. Then when he sees Jesus and talks to him, they said that he was a prophet, mighty indeed. Again, thinking wrongly, thinking incorrectly. Jesus asked the disciples when he was at Caesarea Philippi, he said, who do the people say that I am? And most of them agree that he is a prophet, that he's either John the Baptist, that he's a prophet of old, but he's a prophet. And then he said, well, who do you say that I am? And it's only Peter who says that you are the Christ. So again, they got it incorrect. And because they got it incorrect, there are all these kind of emotions that are going on. There's unbelief, in that unbelief because of the women who've come back and said that he's no longer there. They go to the tomb. They said that they have seen a vision of the Lord Jesus. They don't believe it. Because they don't believe it, because they're not seeing with faith, what happens is that there's sadness. There is that possibility of hope, but that possibility of hope is kind of distant. It's kind of like a little bit better than winning the Powerball, but not too much. This kind of that hope that's out there. Maybe winning the daily number or something like that. But there's that hope, but it's not that high of a hope. So there's all these emotions, sadness, probably wondering, why did we follow him? He turned out to be, the wrong one, but there is this hope and so forth. And so there are all these emotions as they're going along the way. And then what Jesus does is that he has that great Bible study, taking from the scriptures, taking from the Old Testament where it related to him in the scriptures, and then talking to the people along the way, opening their eyes to the fact that the Messiah indeed had to suffer and die for the people, and showing that through the Old Testament. And their eyes are opened with that. And so they then say, well, we're going to be stopping for the night. He's seeming that he's going on a little bit further, but he says, okay, I'll stop with you. As they have food, he takes, he blesses, he breaks, he distributes. And what do we see at the Mass? They take, they bless, they break, they distribute. The same actions that Jesus had in the road to Emmaus are the same actions in the Mass: to take, to bless, to break, and to distribute. The other thing is that we see the readings. The readings are there not to, to take up time or to fill out the hour or whatever. But what they're there to do is to open our eyes, to think about the Lord Jesus, and then to receive him in the Eucharist. And so that's what they do. And when their eyes are opened, he disappears from their sight, because they've now seen with him in the scriptures and in the breaking of the bread. And because they've seen him in both places, that's really the way that we see him. We're not going to see him like they did on the road to Emmaus. We're not going to have a vision of the Lord Jesus. But what we're going to do is we're going to see him as the people in the disciples in the road to Emmaus did, in the scriptures and the breaking of the bread. And when they do that, they become missionaries. They come back to Jerusalem, and they come back quickly. They don't wait and say, well, let's just wait till morning because, it's dark outside. There are no street lights. There are no electricity at that point. But they run back to Jerusalem, and to see the disciples. And so they become missionaries because they've seen the Lord Jesus, and they wanted to make that known to the disciples that what the women said was true, and that he is alive. And so they come back to the disciples, and they have indeed the message. And the message also is that he not only appeared to them, but he also appeared to Simon. So what the women had said was absolutely true. And so what we think about with the road to Emmaus, again, is that idea of seeing with faith, seeing the scriptures, being open to seeing the Lord Jesus in the scriptures, and then also receiving the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, the permanent presence of the Lord Jesus, the real presence of the Lord Jesus there in the Eucharist. Thanks. God bless.